Yeah. But the weather, you can't beat the weather. Okay. All right. V'im einan yodim shezehu shemo. That's what we're up to in Sif Chafei. Now, we had clarified in the previous, is the water on now? There you Okay. V'im einan yodim shezehu shemo. If, let's say, the witnesses cannot verify the guy's identity because they don't know him and they don't have a way of, the guy doesn't have a driver's license on him like we have today. Yicholim lismoch al acher. They can rely on somebody else who can vouch for the guy. Afilu al isha okaro sha'omrim shekach shemo. They can rely even on a woman who normally his testimony is not accepted and based in, or they can rely on a relative of the person. Normally, again, his testimony would not be accepted and based in. Lefisha kol davar sha'asid lihigalos ein b'nei adam mishakrim bo. Because we have a principle in halacha that if something will eventually be discovered as a lie, then, oh, that's for me? Oh, that's very sweet of you. Oh, thank you. Anything that'll eventually be exposed as a lie, people are not going to lie about. There's that principle that it's unlikely that someone is going to lie about their identity if their identity will eventually be discovered as being not that person. Now, of course, that's not going to help with the case that you brought, right, Marvin? People commit fraud and sell someone else's house. Aval shemo shel hamalve o halokeach o mekabel matana yecholim lismoch alav. He says when it comes to a lender, a buyer, or a recipient of a gift, they can rely on him. Imhu shtar sheyesh bo kinyan. If it is a shtar where it involves a transaction, shaharei kosvim oso lo, because they're writing it for that person. In other words, when it comes to a debtor or a seller, where they're the ones that are obligating themselves, they need to prove their identity. And if they can't prove their identity because there's no one there that can vouch for them, the Edom should not sign on the shtar. But if it's the person who's asking them to write the shtar, and they don't know his identity, and he's the one who's shelling out the cash, then he's believed to say, my name is Yankel Bernstein, right? Because why would he forge his identity if he's the one who's going to be on the hook? Af below hamalva alokechu makabel matana v'chein shem halova b'shovar. So then you can rely on his own statement of his own identification of himself, because he's the one who's going to be losing if he misidentifies himself. Similarly, if a person is paying back a debt and he wants to get a receipt, and he asks the witnesses, please witness that on such and such a date I paid back my debt to my lender, and he says, put my name down as Yankel Bernstein, right? Why would he lie about his identity? That would not be to his advantage. And so therefore, you can believe him himself if he tells you his name. Huh? That is warm water. All right. Okay, so let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov. They can rely on a woman's testimony. Alisha afilu imlo amra ela achshav bishas ma'aser. V'kol shekenim shama mimena me'oz shezehu shemo. It doesn't matter whether they had heard from this woman that this was her husband's or her friend's name previously, or whether she's testifying right now. You can rely on other people's IDing of that person as long as you know that other person. If you don't know the other person, then obviously that doesn't make a sense, add any value to that, because they could be colluding. Now, sha'asid lihigalos, if you know something will eventually be revealed, then it's much less likely that you're going to lie. It's only when the fear involves a rabbinic law that we rely on this rationale that anything that will eventually be exposed as a lie, people are not going to lie about. The inyan zeh, the ein kosben ela im kein makirin, einoch shash ela midivrehem. Because this is only a rabbinic ordinance that you're not allowed to sign on a shtar unless you recognize the parties. Umishum hachi ra'u chazal lahamin b'milsa David ligluye afilu eid echad. And it's only for that reason that our sages allowed for witnesses to accept the testimony of even one person who's not kosher normally for a witness. They said, as long as one person tells you that that's that person, you're allowed to sign the shtar. Vafilo alisha samchin, and therefore you could accept even a woman's testimony, even though her testimony is not normally accepted and based on. Aval b'milsa de oraisa, but when it comes to biblical issues, where when you're witnessing something that requires that has biblical ramifications, kaimalon degam b'dinei mamanus ein lismoch al al eid echad. We can never rely on one witness's testimony. Afilu b'milsa David ligluye, even if the matter will eventually be exposed, and we assume that people would not want to lie. Like a get, like a marriage, right? In other words, if I think a get would be a good example. In other words, or a person's testimony in Basin to ratify a transaction that took place, we would never accept only one witness's testimony. The only other time that we're lenient, another example of a rabbinic law where we're lenient, is to permit a woman to remarry. Is to permit an aguna. Let's say a woman wants to remarry and she believes that her husband is deceased, but there's no witnesses that he actually died. So there, the Gemara says that we allow a woman to remarry using only one witness. Even though the ramifications there are biblical, if she were to marry somebody else, if she's still a married woman, but the rabbis basically were able to use a principle called hafkas kiddushin, or really the way the Gemara says it, kol de mekadesh adaita de rabbanan mekadesh. Whenever you get married, it's with the sanction of the sages. And the sages basically said that we're prepared to allow a woman to remarry because the worst that could possibly happen is that we would be forced to annul her original marriage retroactively. And it's based on that principle that we allow a woman, we allow women to rely on one witness, because eventually the matter will be revealed. In other words, if the husband is alive, he'll show up. So no woman is going to remarry until she's verified the matter for herself. She's going to want to verify it and re-verify that her husband's really dead. Right.
Those two concepts contradict the bit, which was saying she's fearful to get remarried because he would show up. We're saying rabbis could always annul and first marriage, so the kids wouldn't be. It almost sounds like she knows that, maybe she's less fearful.
Yeah, I don't.
I hear both of them separately, but when together, it's
yeah, maybe I'm not saying it properly, but I think that's part of the rationale as why the rabbis allowed a woman to remarry based on one witness's testimony, because and that's what Rip Stern seems to imply, is that the stakes there, again, are only are only rabbinic. If she remarries and those kids are going to be mamzerim. Yeah, but that's the point, is that they don't actually annul the first marriage. They have the power to. And so that's, I think, one of the arguments that's made to allow her, even though they're not going to annul it, but it's sort of like within their control. But I'll try and get you a better presentation as to what the mechanism is. We know that the rabbis do permit a woman to remarry with only one witness. They say mishum iguna hitiru. And so I'll just bring this up. Okay. Be'ezo samchut chachamim bitlu et ha'ikaron shel al pi shnayim eidim yakum davar. There are certain circumstances where the rabbis annulled requiring two witnesses. Madua chachamim asu zot. Why did the chachamim do this? He says mishum iguna. So is it midoraisa or midorabbanan? So Rashi in Yavamo says like this: She'imba bala atanoten aleha kol hadvarim ha'ilu shebemishnatenu hikalta aleha batchila leheter li'nasim mipnei shechosheshet shemetit kalkel b'lo minsa ba'ad debat kashapir. A woman will not remarry until she checks into it very carefully, because she knows that both she and her children will be stigmatized if she remarries while her husband is still alive. Let's see. Yes, because then she would stigmatize the Kohen as well. Okay, but basically, there's a lot of machlokas as to what mechanism is being utilized by the Chachamim to permit this. So there is this idea of Havkas HaKidushin. He says that I'm showing it up here on the screen, and I'm not showing this up to the other people. Okay. He says Rashi b'Masechah Shabbos mityaches ledivrei haGemara she'ein eid mipi eid kasher ela le'idut isha. Rashi in Masechah Shabbos says that one witness hearing from another witness, or a single witness, is not kosher. But when it comes to testifying that a man is deceased, so a woman can remarry, we are lenient. Masbir shehikilu ba chachamim mishum iguna. He says, and the reason is, as I had told you, that the rabbis, anyone who gets married does so with the sanction of the Chachamim, and therefore they have the power to annul the marriage. As I had mentioned, it turns out that they're actually annulling the first marriage so that the woman will not get into too much trouble. Ulakach yesh lahem samchut mishum shemerosh beit hakiddushin hamakadosh kiddush al daitam. And it's because when the woman first got married to her first husband, it was all done under the sort of the sanction of the sages, who basically said, you can stay married as long as we're happy with you staying married. בפשיטות זהו הפירוש לשיטתם גם בסוגייתנו לעניין ההקלה בעדות איש להסתמך על עד אחד, ולפי זה יובן כיצד לאחר התקנה הדין מועיל אפילו מדאורייתא. And that would help to explain what's going on over here. In any event, there's a whole long arichos, a whole long discussion on this matter, which we're not going to continue now. But I just wanted to make you aware that that's the principle. Okay, now, so again, only under certain rabbinic legal circumstances can we rely on one witness. Okay, all right, so let's go on. Let's see, there's more Imrei Yaakov here. Sheyesh bo kinyan. He says any kind of shtar that involves a transaction where the person who is the one who stands to lose if he misidentifies himself tells you his identity, then you're allowed to believe him just by him telling you, my name is Yaakov Bernstein. Sheyesh bo kinyan, dim lo nase kinyan sudar, chayshinan shema ein adam zeh she'omed lefanav hamal ve'ha'amiti. He says, because if he doesn't make a kinyan, but he has to make a kinyan in front of the witnesses. Because if he doesn't make a kinyan in front of the witnesses to obligate himself to give the money, he says, we're worried that maybe the lender who says he's Yaakov Bernstein, maybe he's not Yaakov Bernstein. And v'halo v'lo yimser hashtar lamalveh ad la'achar zman v'yitrof l'kuchot shelo kedin. And we're worried that the love, the borrower, will not give the contract to the lender until after a certain amount of time, and this will enable him to confiscate property illegally. In other words, let's say a lender and a borrower come before two witnesses, and that we recognize the borrower, but we don't recognize the lender. And the lender says, my name is Yaakov Bernstein. So we just learned in this halacha that you're allowed to believe Yaakov Bernstein because he's the one who's losing money if he lies about his identity. But that's only if we see a kinyan, either the actual transfer of the money, or we see them, we have to actually see the loan taking place. If we don't see the loan taking place, but they just ask us to write up paper, then we don't know if the loan is actually going to take place or not. And then what might potentially happen is that we sign the date when the loan took place when it really didn't take place. And then this will give this guy the ability to seize assets from a third party, what's called, if he'll claim that he had a lien on all of the debtor's assets, the debtor will in the meantime have sold off property before the loan took place. And then the creditor will illegally seize assets of people that purchased property from the debtor before the loan took place. And this could be a collusive process. This could involve collusion between the two parties. So therefore the witnesses should not sign until they see the actual loan taking place. But if we see the actual transaction taking place, then we don't have to worry that this is going to be a predated contract. And this is how it's paskend in Shulchan Aruch. But the Sma is more machmir, and he holds that under all circumstances, the witnesses have to recognize both parties. They have to recognize both the debtor and the creditor. Ulam hashach kosav deheker shulchan aruch v'chein pirish kan harav. The shach argues and sides with the Shulchan Aruch, and this is how the Rav Shulchan Aruch paskins. As long as they know the identity of the debtor, they don't have to know the identity of the creditor. They can just take his word for it that he is who he says he is. Okay?
Doesn't know the witness. So there's a possibility that the creditor and the two witnesses are in collusion against the victim. That the more involved us. But then understand
What's the Gemara in Bava Basra?
Bottom line, it's a collusion. The whole thing's a collusion between the creditor and the witnesses against the victim.
Right. Okay.
So I'm just trying to understand this. The debtor need to
Right.
in order to protect himself from any form of
Well, if a guy comes forward and he says, "I'm willing to lend you money," or it's really the more likely case is that the debtor is colluding with witnesses, not the creditor. The creditor is the one who's lending the money, right? So maybe the debtor goes over to two guys and says, "I'm going to swindle Ruvain out of $10,000. The way I'm going to do it is, you guys will be my witnesses on the loan. I'll give you each $1,000. I'll keep 8,000, and then you'll both say that you never saw such a loan take place." Okay, so that would be that would be a potential for criminal behavior, right? So in general, we don't worry about that. It's probably to the creditor, the lender's advantage to play a role in knowing who the witnesses are, especially if he fears that the debtor is a bit of a swindler. And if the debtor says, "I'll bring my own witnesses," then it smells a little fishy, right? Why are you bringing your own witnesses? Let's just get a couple of guys from shul, right? Why do we have to get your guys specifically? So that could raise some flags. But under normal circumstances, we don't, if two people present as frum Jews, we don't normally suspect that they're automatically suspect. Yeah. Generally, a God-fearing Jew, a Jew who presents as observant, is considered to be have a cheskes kashrus. He has an assumption of being a kosher person, unless we know otherwise. Does that apply still today? I was just having a conversation with a therapist we were talking about service to the religious community, and I was lamenting the fact that so many of the psychological issues that are manifesting in the general society and the social dysfunctions that manifest in the general society are manifesting in the frum community as well. Like divorce rate in the frum community is now starting to approach general society, and that's very alarming, right? And the question really is: so what have we done wrong? What has failed us, right? And it seems that for many people who present as Orthodox, their view of Orthodoxy is, I'm Shomer Shabbos, I go to shul on Shabbos and I eat kosher, and I observe family purity law. And if that's the way of identifying yourself as an Orthodox Jew, then we've sort of, it's quite likely that so many other of the social ills that exist in the general society will seep into a Jewish home as well. Because those three mitzvahs are not enough to stop the dysfunction from entering into a family, into a home. And that's unfortunately why so many Jews are in therapy and suffer from social issues that the general society suffers from. So going back to the question, can we assume that when a person is Orthodox, they are going to be truthful? And I still believe the answer is yes. Still believe the answer is yes, because it's unlikely that someone's going to be able to hire a person to lie in front of a Beis Din. That really takes a tremendous amount of chutzpah and really calls upon a person to believe that God is not watching. And I don't think that for the average Orthodox Jew, he's going to be prepared to do that. Okay, so we'll hold it here for today. We'll continue Mirz Hashem tomorrow.